Unfortunately, you probably need to bring that information to a lawyer, but here's the difficulty.
One important question, I think, for New Yorkers is how do you check if your apartment is rent stabilized?
The way you check is you get the apartment registration history from the Division of Housing and Community Renewal. So landlords are required to annually register rent stabilized apartments. So if you obtain this history, you'll be able to see how long the apartment was stabilized, what the rent was, when it allegedly became destabilized, what the rent was at that point, what the threshold was at that point that the landlord needed to get to in order to destabilize. Unfortunately, you probably need to bring that information to a lawyer, but here's the difficulty. The DHCR will not give anyone who walks off the street the rent history for an apartment. They have to prove that they're connected somehow to the apartment. You have to produce either a lease or a utility bill or a rent bill or some other document to show that you are the tenant or an occupant of that apartment. So if you're not in it yet, it's very hard to get that information. And it used to be, if you had that information, you could walk into one of their offices and get it. Since the pandemic, they've made it harder to do that. And what they prefer to do is simply mail the information to the apartment in question. But if you're not yet in that apartment, you're not going to get that mail. So let's say you have a piece of paper from a broker, or let's say the landlord has agreed to rent you the apartment and has sent you the lease to look over and sign. You might be able to run down to the DHCR and say to them, look, I'm going to be the tenant of this apartment. I want to see the rent history. I honestly don't know whether they will give it or not to a prospective tenant. I've never seen that situation. So the answer is generally, you got to move in, then request the rent history, then take it to an attorney to analyze whether you have a claim that the apartment was improperly deregulated and that you, in fact, are rent stabilized, which, by the way, has become a huge part of our practice since the passage of HISPA.